It's my distinct pleasure to have Nezzie Wade from Affordable Homeless Housing Alternatives up in Eureka, California, to talk to us about a wonderful happening at the Eureka City Council this week where they declared a shelter crisis. Welcome to the show, Nezzie Wade.
Thanks, Bill Mash. It's nice to be with you.
So for all the listeners of The Real Issue here on the 120 KZFR, The Real Issue Show, can you give us a little bit of a detail on how happy people were to see that shelter crisis declared and what positive benefits that's going to have for the community of Eureka, California?
I think the community that came to the city council meeting and stayed for the long haul was very happy, but I think it was more a sigh of relief.
It's just going, man, I know you've got the same heart as me, Nezzie, but it's like, what took so long? It's pretty blatantly obvious that there's a shelter crisis.
Well, Bill, there was that big discussion about, we've had a problem. It's been a problem for a long time, but an emergency or crisis, that's when you have a fire or a natural disaster or some other thing, and there probably isn't anything that has in the cumulative costs over all the years that this has been allowed to go, that is more expensive than just the status quo. So this is going to give some opportunities for community to step up, for private parties to step up, for people who want to volunteer and help to step up. They've framed it so that really the city doesn't have any financial responsibility. They do have the responsibility to work with a third party or a nonprofit or somebody else or other groups that want to step up and do this. That would mean that there'd have to be some kind of agreements made with the city or whatever if it's city-owned properties. But that's the focal point of the California Code, is that when the political subdivision declares a shelter crisis, then you can open up facilities that are either owned, operated, or leased by that political subdivision. So we were asking to use that in conjunction with SB2 zones in Eureka. The SB2 zones that they were willing to offer, even in the housing element, were the ones in the commercial service district, which is interesting because that's all the business area, So I was asking some questions about that and recently discovered that our SB2 zones weren't run by the Coastal Commission to give approval to the other sites that were identified. So we went through and did with the state law. The SB Senate Bill 2 wanted the housing element to reflect, but it wasn't put through the paces to have the approval of the Coastal Commission, and they're all in the coastal zone here because we're right on the coast. So I have visited all of the sites that are listed in our housing element as available for emergency shelter. And it's in the commercial district, so a lot of it's right downtown or on Broadway. And it's the old hotels, lots of car lots, a few open spaces. A lot of them are already occupied by ongoing businesses, which is not uncommon, I guess, with SB2 zones that both the city and the county have contracted with to do an analysis of homelessness in Humboldt County and provide. They did a study, said, don't do sanctuary camps, don't over-police, don't do sweeps, don't try and maintain the situation. Don't put your money into that. Just put it into permanent housing through the rapid rehousing program. And we've been focusing on that and not dealing with any other potential options. So this really put a little bit more pressure on the city to respond to the other opportunities like sanctuary camps, safe parking, also tiny house villages. We've talked about this from the beginning. We've had that tiny house expo, as you might recall. And
I do. So let me just stop for a second and for listeners, and even for me, I'm not as familiar as you obviously are. Could give us a little thumbnail on what it means for State Bill 2, zoning. What does that entail, Nezzie?
Well, the state Senate Bill 2 requires that all communities in their cities and counties in their housing elements of their general plan specify zones in which, in an emergency, people can be sheltered. And so those SB2 zones, we were looking at, since we declared a shelter crisis, that those, in terms of an emergent situation, we could use those, and we could use those fairly quickly. And they also worked in conjunction with the California law, which lessens the liability so that you don't have to meet the same housing. You don't have to meet the same health and safety codes. And pretty much anything, you can work out anything as long as it's not, you don't have aren't engaged in gross negligence. And so we thought we could use those zones right away because here the pressure is on the people who are living out in the marsh. There is a lot of construction trail work that's going on, and the city is adamant that they want to get the people that are camping there, probably about 200 campers at least, out of the marsh. But they don't have a place to go now. I mean, there's no alternate place. We do have a mission, and they always claim that there's not enough, capacity. There's plenty of capacity at the mission because it's never full. But even if it were full, that would only hold 90 people. And it's usually got, 30, I suppose. But people don't go there because it's for a lot of reasons. We talked about this before with.
Yeah, we did. So maybe you could describe a little bit. It seemed like I'm just trying to go back to your statements a few minutes ago, but the city doesn't want any, my words, doesn't want any financial liability. Are they going to lease, if it's public land, will they lease it to you, or is this going to be a private land only kind of deal?
That's what we're hoping. And I don't know. It all will have to be worked out because there isn't really a precedent or cases to really go by. There are cities who have declared shelter crises, and we've looked to their documents to help us advocate for what we wanted here. And so did our council person for writing up a resolution, and the city attorney. But we really, in terms of where we go from here and why that's important and what we want to get out of it, we just have to keep the process moving and now look for a site to develop a sanctuary camp. And then there's a lot of volunteer effort in the community. Some people in the faith-based communities want to participate. And there are people who've been trained, and we'll do more of that as we move along. We're going to hopefully start having meetings involving lots more people, sort of a task force kind of thing. We asked for a task force from the city. That hasn't been forthcoming. We're asking also for the development of the task force from the county because the county has all the services. Here, the city doesn't have the finances to do anything, really, in terms of social services, for darn sure. And they don't have a budget for that at all. And the city has a $66 million budget where the county has a $156 million budget, and they have all the services. So the county can help with zoning and ordinance and bending those kinds of things and helping us find something to do there. But as far as funding the kinds of supports that people need and getting them connected to services, that will have to come through the county.
So that was a city council meeting. So that's specific to the city limits of Eureka, where the shelter crisis has been declared.
Yeah, exactly.
So as we speak, there's a shelter crisis in Eureka as voted on. What was the vote on the city council?
3-2.
3-2.
Yep. Council member Atkins introduced some alternate language for the resolution that was submitted by the city attorney, not changing the intent, but certainly changing the language a lot. And it was seconded by Council member Arroyo. And then there was a very dramatic discussion about, this isn't proper, you can't do this. And actually, they asked questions of the city attorney, is it okay to do this? I mean, can we change it this much? And really, the intent wasn't changed. So the city attorney said, we do this with ordinances all the time. You can change all the language if you want to. It's on the agenda. You've got a motion on the floor. And so the council member Burgell asked several questions about resolution, and there were counter arguments by Brady and Cherbolini saying that it would be irresponsible to vote on a shelter crisis before our meeting next Tuesday with the county and Focus Strategies, because we've been waiting now for, about 15 months since Focus Strategies report came, and they contracted with them to do a scope of work and then now the implementation plan for housing in Eureka. And that most people feel is going to be insufficient because we simply don't have affordable housing. No. And we might have some projects ongoing, but we really don't have affordable housing. And there are people that just aren't eligible for the programs that we have. So we actually have a problem in gaps with our continuum of care, which truly the expectation is that it would be from overnight to life ability to care for people. And we really have some big gaps in that because a lot of people, because they lack entry or... Maybe
you could kind of distill it down in just a couple of minutes in your view of why this has happened. I know you guys have been very active in the city council, very active in nonviolent demonstrations, very active talking to community members and hosting community meetings. Why don't you kind of let our listeners know, how we might be able to do this in Chico? I mean, what process did you do to make this happen? Maybe we could do it here in Chico.
Well, there's lots of people a lot of advocacy groups, and we've used social media. We've used some demonstrations at the courthouse. AHHA, for example, has a regular meeting once a month, and we've put out a call for people who are interested in organizing a legal sleep campaign, and we've talked about supporting, the Homeless Bill of Rights that RAP is involved in, SB 876 now, and keeping it in the public narrative, going to city council meetings and continuing to press for the shelter crisis and talking about the actual numbers of people and where they are. And what we've done, just like the UC Berkeley Law Center for Advocacy came out with a report that 58 cities in our region have passed 500 anti-homeless or anti-camping criminalizing ordinances to the average of about 9 per city. And we're right along with them. In the last few years since we've been working on this, there's been more and more and more ordinance. And we've just been ordinanced to death. And it's kind of like, look, you can't change it through ordinance. It's a crisis we're having with not enough housing, and we need some alternatives. Yes, permanent housing is the answer, absolutely. But right now, that's going to take a lot longer than we have. And, getting people even into temporary situations. They also introduced last night the concept of starting a safe parking program. And so that's going to be coming around. They're thinking about putting out an RFP, just like they are for the, sanctuary camp, to give people an opportunity to come forward. They've talked about having a workshop with community members who are interested to talk about what would be the elements that would have to go into an RFP for putting a call out there for people to submit proposals. So we're moving in that direction, and it's kind of like they finally have gotten that we're not going away. We shall not be turned around. So.
Wow, that's exceptional, because like I said, I'm the Debbie Carries and the Aarons and the John Earls and all these wonderful folks have been working so hard, on the streets and on social media and in public space to make this happen. That's what it's going to take, Chico.
And actually holding public events. Some of the things that we've done when we brought Andrew Heben here and when we had the Tiny House Expo, lots of people came out and they could see, some of the options. That was one thing that really got people who were working on this issue 30 years ago here back into the movement, because they went, yeah, I could see that. And so it's been very exciting that way. We've had that really wonderful infusion of some people who have been long-standing advocates. They got burned out because they got beat up, and they've kind of come back around and, okay.
Well, I'm not surprised at all, because I know I went up to that meeting you guys had in AHHA, 2014, and I'd been singing the praises of how well you guys were organized. But where I can look at this outside looking in, because I live in Humboldt County, where I think Nezzie, AHHA, and the folks at Eureka have been successful is because you've applied pressure to all the levers. You haven't just said, all I'm going to do is protest in front of City Hall, or all I'm going to do is have community meetings, or you've really kind of taken a really good look at what the levers are, and you've done an exceptional job of pushing those levers and moving stuff forward.
Well, and we have, Bill, and we've really challenged the status quo, because when we first started this, our community development director said, I'm not even certain there is a lack of affordable housing. And I, of course, after he gave his report, said, there's no doubt in my mind that we have a lack of affordable housing. And we just had to be persistent and educate around what the lacks are and why it is. When Paul came up here, Bowden from San Francisco.
Yeah, that was awesome.
It was great, because for the first time, people, and I did the same thing very quickly, but I was speaking at the Martin Luther King Jr. Day on Monday and took the RAP poster that showed the drop in funding of housing, because it's so graphic. And I said, I brought this poster just to sort of flash it around so you can see that where we are is not a mystery. This is where housing funding used to be. This is where it was in '84, and it's never picked up again. We've tried to meet the same demands with increasing population and more dislocation, and it's impossible. So there's no doubt now, nobody will say we don't have a problem with affordable housing. We absolutely do.
That's a beautiful thing, because that's the community event that I helped organize. It was Affordable Housing Explained, which was co-sponsored by Western Regional Advocacy Project. And I told a quick story, Nezzie, at that meeting. So I was over at 6th Street Drop-In Center for Youth. It's for homeless youth, people experiencing homeless, unaccompanied youth. And I was talking about affordable housing, and there was a kid sitting at the table, and right behind him was a case manager, and he said, "Oh, everybody knows what affordable housing is." So I was like, "Well, what is it?" And I didn't leave him hanging for very long because he couldn't answer the question. So I told him it was like spending more than 30% of your income on basic utilities or rent. And then when I said that, the case manager behind him actually said, "Oh my God," she says, "that means that like most people in Butte County are living in an unaffordable housing situation."
That's right.
So here I am sitting with someone experiencing homelessness that didn't know what it meant. And I'm sitting there with a professional that helps these people that didn't know what it meant. A lot of people just don't understand that, one, how dire the affordable housing crisis is, and two, that it's not just a houseless issue, it's a housed issue, in that everyone is suffering from this issue of not having a good affordable housing stock so they can do other things and other than pay for their rent,
People are on the edge, Bill, and it's everywhere. And that's, one of the really important things. What we did also in the very beginning, before we brought Andrew Heben here, I spent a lot of time myself just going around and talking to people, going to board meetings, going into places other people were meeting, and saying, here's what the Human Rights Commission has done, here's what the ACLU has done in terms of asking the Board of Supervisors to declare a shelter crisis. And AHHA's mission is to get people safe, warm, and dry, and to work with others on these alternatives that we've been talking about. But also, we just kept saying, we're going to keep working towards a shelter crisis declaration, because that's what it's going to take to get the focus and the resources.
Yeah, because it almost comes down to basic communications. It's like, so now people that know nothing about the issue go, "Oh my God, we have a shelter crisis. What's going on?" Right? It's like this.
And a lot of people know what that is now, and they understand that it's because we have criminalized sleep. When the students did that fundraiser for us at HSU, that Shake It for Solutions,
that was awesome.
They made a bunch of buttons, and I've had this one on since that night on my jacket that says "Legalized Sleep." And I've been traveling, and for 2 weeks I was gone. I went and visited my son and went around places. And this has been the greatest little ticket to conversation. People on the other side of the counter, if I stopped, I picked up some licorice for a friend of mine in a candy store, and they go, legalized sleep, what's that? And I said, well, it's what we have to do. Unless somebody has a house or a hotel or some other means, they don't have legal sleep. They have to sleep outside, and they're criminals because of it, because we've made it a crime. And they're like, "Oh, wow, that's right." Or they can't stand it. They
haven't thought through.
It's been a great tool for educators.
It has, and that's a shout out to the Lion. I call it the Lion of Southern Humboldt, Deborah Carey. That's been her tagline for years, and it's a good one. Legalized sleep,
Yeah.
We did a few little cool without a roof vignettes around that,
It's great. Yeah, and Deborah called me this morning. We've all been chatting it up and sharing our tears over a long process, and we're all really, honestly, relieved. And now they made the resolve to declare a shelter crisis. Now we have to resolve our next steps and how we move forward.
We do, and I'd be remiss if I didn't do a shout out. I know Kathleen Epling is looking down, smiling.
And we, Susie Van Kirk was a very long time advocate, worked here tirelessly for people on the street up in Arcata, and she just passed away a couple weeks ago, and we have that same feeling about she's shedding some light on all of this too. So
she was such a private woman, but I'll say for the listeners, you can't get Wi-Fi in Garberville. That's the way to make sure people know they're not welcome. So I literally, in 2014, I had to hang around for hours on end in the bookstore in Garberville, and I really got maybe a better view than almost anyone over a period of weeks of just not only how much she did, Nezzie, but the way she did it. She was completely selfless. That woman was just absolutely amazing. So, Kathleen Epling, we love you. Anything we want to end on here, Nezzie?
Stay tuned, because it's going to be exciting when we start actually looking at how we're going to do this. We have proposals. They're going to start asking for them. So we'll see what happens. But I think the more people involved to do things, the merrier, and the better for the folks. We need to come up with the best options, and it's only going to come out of the beautiful hearts and minds that have been working in this direction.
Awesome, Nezzie Wade. I can't wait to get back up there and see you. I know I was telling Paul Bowden I'd love to do something with him in 2016. He's like, "Yeah, brother, maybe we go back up to Humboldt." I'm down for that.
All right.
All right, Nezzie Wade. Thanks again for all you do, and give everyone a hug for me up there in Humboldt County.
I will, Bill. I'll make it my job.
Yeah, a big KZFR hug. Big KZFR.
Okay.
All righty. Blessings to you. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.